The village board meeting for Tuesday, June 21st, 2016 to order with roll call, please.
Dudek,
Here.
Cavelli,
Here.
Chapman,
Here.
McAlpine,
Here.
Kraus,
Here.
Jim is
I'm sure he's coming.
coming down.
He's
So,
here.
He's here.
Good. Okay. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll now move to the open forum where the public is invited to make an issue-oriented comment on any matter of public concern not otherwise on the agenda.
That's okay.
Richard Riley, are you with a petitioner? Okay.
Sorry, I just signed.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's somebody else.
Okay.
All right, we'll go ahead and close open forum. Moving to the mayor's board, I have a few things on our agenda. I have one employee that's been with the village of Cary for 5 years. His name is John Stein. He works for the Public Works Department, so he was unable to meet us today to give we have a small stipend for a 5-year anniversary. So our director, Morimoto, will handle that with him too. And next I have Joylyn Henderson, who's been with the police department for 1 year. I'd like to call her up and give her her little tag here.
Just a couple things about Jolene. She comes to us via the Village of Lakewood. She was trained as a paralegal. I can't think of any time I've ever seen her have a bad day. She's a very pleasant person, very intelligent, engaging, and our latest conquest has been to revamp the ice cream vendor solicitor process. So we're really very lucky to have a very good records section right now, and Jolene is one of the, parts of that record section.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That was nice. And I have one proclamation tonight, Parks and Recreation and Parks Month. Recreation and Parks Month, July 2016, whereas parks, recreation activities, and leisure experiences provide opportunities for young people to live, grow, and develop into contributing members of society. And whereas Parks and Recreation creates lifelines and continued life experiences for older members of our community. And whereas generating opportunities for people to come together and experience a sense of community through fun recreational pursuits. And whereas park and recreation agencies provide outlets for physical activities, socializations, and stress-reducing experiences. Whereas parks, playgrounds, natural trails, open spaces, community and cultural centers, and historic sites make communities attractive and desirable place to live, work, play, and visit in a manner that contributes to our ongoing economic vitality. And whereas parks, greenways, and open spaces provide a welcome respite from our fast-paced, high-tech lifestyles, we're simultaneously protecting and preserving our natural environment. And whereas employees and volunteers in public parks and recreational facilities keep these public parks and facilities clean, safe, and enjoyable for visitors, organize youth, adult, senior, family, and community activities, provide educational programming, advocate for more open space and better trails, and fundraise for local improvements. And whereas parks and recreation agencies touch the lives of individuals, families, groups, and the entire community, which positively impacts upon the social, economic, health, and environmental quality of our community. Therefore, I, Mark Kownick, Mayor of the Village of Cary, do hereby proclaim July as Recreation and Parks Month in the Village of Cary. Encourage all citizens to celebrate healthy, active lifestyles by participating in their choice of recreation and park activities. Dated this 21st day of June, 2016. Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda items number 1 through 8. And I've been asked to pull number 5 for further consideration. So I will amend that to approve the consent agenda items number 1 through 4 and 6 through 8.
So Second.
Roll call, please.
McAlpine?
Yes.
Cosler?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Dudek?
Yes.
Valley?
Yes.
Chapman?
Yes.
Thank you. And I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda item number 5.
So moved. Second.
Trustee Dudek, did you have some questions?
I did, thank you, Mayor. I think in general, I am absolutely supportive of outdoor seating for the Cary Ale House. However, I have to admit, and I think I did express some concerns about certain parts of the application at the last board meeting. After a personal recent visit there, I kind of drove around the facility in the evening and tried to place where this was going to be built. And I just, I have reservations that the location is the best for that particular spot. I'm not the proprietor, I don't pay the bills, but when I left, I continued going down Main Street and drove past the tracks where their outside facility is very noticeable on Main Street. And I do think, because this is just my personal opinion, I do think because it is so apparent that that restaurant, the Tracks, has outdoor seating, but you can't miss it given where it is right on Main Street, that it helps that establishment where the location of the proposed site for the ale house won't be very evident from the traffic that goes east and west on Main Street, and at the end of the day may not be as positive of an improvement for the seasonal use that the proprietors are proposing. So I just wanted to state that, to bring it up, that, and I had a whole bunch of questions that I was going to ask Brian about, if they were located in the front, how much parking would they potentially lose? Is there another spot, another place where those 5 or 6 spots could be located? Did we have parking variances originally? I just don't remember that stuff. But to me, it seems that the location for outdoor seating for the ale house would be much more advantageous to put in the front and run it along Main Street, where people that drive by would see it and say, hey, that looks like a cool place. Why don't we stop? I just wanted to mention that.
Well, let's get some of your code questions answered. Brian, could you come up and answer a couple of those codes regarding parking?
The proposed location is not going to, it could take up any existing parking spaces. It does slightly shift existing spaces over. And under our licensing requirements for outdoor seating, they're not supposed to take up existing parking stalls. The current restaurant did not require a variance because they took over an existing restaurant from before, so the use change did not
So when they
require-
went in originally, there was no parking variances?
Correct.
Okay.
And while an outdoor seating area in the front might be more prominent from the standpoint, our code, doesn't dictate where it would be located on the property. So, their design or location here, and the petitioner might be able to respond more to it from an operational standpoint. To access it, it's close to their kitchen area where their servers are at. So it's easier for them to access in that rear portion of the site to be able to provide the dining space in that location. But from a code perspective, anywhere else in the property might or likely would require elimination of some parking spaces.
So do you know how many spots are in the front? Is it 5 or 6? Right along the front of the building?
Yeah, I believe it's like 5 spaces directly in front of the building. And it's a very short drive aisle, so from an access standpoint, you would lose some parking spaces if you put something in front of the building.
And, is it a fair statement to say that even at the Tracks on a Friday or Saturday night, people are parking in the Harris Bank parking lot?
Yeah, I think from a downtown standpoint, with the restaurants that we have there, there's, overflow parking that does go in other adjacent parking lots, the Village lot that we own next to the Harris Bank lot. I believe all the street parking does fill up, fairly quickly. Even during the day, the parking that's there does fill up. It's on street. You do have ample parking the next blocks over, that is available. It's a short walk to get to the locations that are there, but in general, you do have overflow parking beyond the properties that exist there. And it's just the nature of the downtown area, how it was developed over time. You don't have parking based off current uses standards that you would have. It was developed during a time period where autos weren't as prominent.
And by ordinance, is it 4 o'clock? Did they free up the Metro spaces at night?
It's 6-hour parking.
Okay.
Generally. The only reason I know this is we looked at this for the cruise night and possibly using the lot that's adjacent to the bank and near the Carrie Ale House for more exhibition of the cars or display of the cars. And it's a 6-hour parking limit, so there's no real parking restrictions as it relates to time period.
And I would add that as a housekeeping item, in two of the past communities I've worked for, with respect to downtown parking like this, when businesses start coming in and restaurants, these type of establishments, we might want to revisit that commuter parking ordinance and after a certain hour, free it up so that anybody could park after, say, 4 o'clock at no cost, because
It is right now.
okay, that's what I was asking. Okay, so we have that now during the week, including weekends?
Correct. It's free on the weekends. And
Okay.
after, again, it's 4, 6 o'clock, it's free.
Okay, so we just need to remember that there is a lot of parking typically when,
The newer trustees, Dave and Jeff, you probably remember, because he didn't do it right away, he didn't buy all the temporary fencing and all that stuff. But I envision that something like that in front of Carrie Ale House that would just be, the seasonal thing during the same period of time when it's most likely to be outside would be the kind of operation. I don't think you'd have any less capacity to run it across the whole front of the building compared to in the back. And given the other parking areas that are around downtown, I'm just looking to throw an idea out there that I think makes the restaurant even more desirable. And I don't think being in the back is the best location, so.
Does the fact that they own both sides of the building now, does that come into play with the parking? Does that increase or reduce their obligation for parking because now they've acquired that?
No, I mean, from the standpoint, I think when we've looked at uses downtown, we've looked at the ample parking that's in the area for the Metro lot, so that we haven't required variances from that standpoint. From their outdoor dining area, it's not going to require additional parking to be provided for the use. And the location that they're proposing it, and you can kind of see in the aerial, there is some excess space next to the parking stalls. So they, by shifting the parking stalls over versus the front sidewalk is a somewhat narrow sidewalk, they would be able to get a larger dining area in that location. I think is the reason why they were proposing, and the petitioner can provide more information on that, but I believe that's the reason why they chose that location.
Can we talk to Chris? Can you come up? Maybe you can address some of the operational concerns and that you may have.
No problem. Chris Panagakis, 208 West Main Street in Cary. There's a couple of issues with being in front, besides losing the parking. Really, that was my first primary concern. We would lose, in order to get that size of a space, at least 3 to 4, maybe even 5 parking stalls. We have enough issues with parking as it is. Our neighbors complain about it when the patrons park there. There's other things. So people, park wherever they want. They'll come in, they'll sit wherever. And just having those parking spaces is extremely important. Want to clarify another thing. On a technical level, my business does not own or have anything to do with the property next door. That was acquired by my landlord, and I have an opportunity to lease it. Right now, there's no signed lease. There's nothing. So someone else could move in there. We're looking at the possibility of doing something there, but nothing is set in stone. So really, I can't touch that. It's not mine. So I've got 3 spaces directly in front of my part, and then I'd have to kind of go around the corner, kind of create an L. But in order for egress and stuff like that for my servers to get through the dining room, I would have to rearrange my dining room for a walkway, cut a hole in the wall, build a door, or get rid of that booth and open up the other door to be able to go through there to have ease of access for serving the patrons, as opposed to in the back when I have the one solid door. It's a lot quicker, a lot easier to get hot food out there and get the cold drinks out there before, ice melts and stuff like that. More importantly, we also have dead space back there. So to me, dead real estate should be utilized. So we're just trying to use up a space that's empty right now and without losing anything. So for the best operational standpoint of the business, it makes more sense logistically to have it in the back. Excuse me. And I don't lose any parking, which is extremely important to me and the customers. And you'll be able to see, kind of part of it, but you'll actually be able to see it from 14, which I don't know. I know it has a lot more traffic counts. I think it's 30,000 per day than in the back. So that's something to be considered about as well. And our goal in creating the space was to bring a city-type atmosphere and pub to Cary. It's a long, narrow space. It's very similar to the kind of bars and stuff like that that you'd see, restaurants and whatnot in the city. And a lot of them have their outdoor space in the back. And so in doing so, I'm creating a garden-type environment back there to make it vibrant, to make it a thing where people can come, they can enjoy it. And it's like your whole little, serene outdoor space, as opposed to dealing with the sound of traffic, coming by, whizzing by, being in front of everyone, people seeing you eating, stuff like that. And there it's going to be a little bit quieter. There'll be, you'll be surrounded by the plants and the flowers and the garden type atmosphere that I put out there. And I think overall you'll be a lot more comfortable as a patron and it will help everyone.
So you're a young guy, you've never been on Clark and Eddy Street?
Oh, I've been there. Yeah. I don't like it.
You eat right on the curb.
I really don't like it, like once, but I'm a different guy.
I
so.
can appreciate all your comments, and I'm not, again, I'd be the last person to want to rain on the parade. I'm glad that you're putting some outdoor seating on there.
Mhm.
I would love to see you do something in the front, even if it was only in front of your space and not the other space, with some temporary fencing, because, that'll give you as proprietor kind of a feel for, well, where are people preferring to sit? Are they preferring to sit in the front?
Mhm.
By giving, it doesn't sound, and I know your argument about the parking, but it doesn't sound like, based on the capacity in the general area, parking really is an issue, if I understand Jake and Brian correctly. So I get it, when you can park right in front as opposed to 200 feet away, it's more convenient.
Well, I've seen people drive through and then not come back,
Okay.
It is what it is, but it happens.
Okay, well, good luck on the outdoor space in the back. I just felt compelled to want to bring it up and talk about it again. And,
I understand.
I'd love to see you put something in the front at some point.
We'll put a bench out there for waiting and a flower box.
Yeah. Yeah. All right,
Thank you.
I will entertain a motion to approve an application for outdoor seating for a food and drink establishment that serves alcohol for the Cary Ale House and Brew. I'm sorry. Roll call,
Yeah.
please. I forgot I did that already.
That's okay. Chapman,
Yes.
Kraus,
Yes.
Cosler,
Yes.
Cavelli,
Yes.
Dudek,
Yes.
McAlpine.
Yes.
I will entertain a motion to approve Resolution R16-06-12, authorizing the acceptance of a zoning application for the conditional use for a telecommunications antenna for the property located at 30 Northwest Highway.
So moved.
Second.
Hey, Brian.
Thank you, Mayor. The request before you this evening, just briefly give a brief overview and then let the petitioner come up and provide more information as far as what they're seeking approval of this evening. As the board is aware, in December of last year, the village received an application for a zoning petition for the property located at 30 Northwest Highway for a cell tower installation. That petition went through the zoning process, was a public hearing in January, and then ultimately was reviewed by the village board in February of this year. The petition was recommended for denial by the village board. And under our existing codes and regulations in the zoning code, a petition for the same request cannot be resubmitted for a time period of 1 year for the same property, unless the board, in this case, that denied the request, recommends approval of the village to accept the revised petition for the subject property under resolution. Petitioner is here this evening to provide a presentation. They have a PowerPoint and then a couple of audiovisual things they would like to present for the request, seeking approval to resubmit an application to go back through the zoning process for requesting the subject property. So with that, I'll invite Mr. Riley up here as the petitioner. He can provide some additional information on that, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have after his presentation as well.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, trustees. My name is Richard Riley on behalf of the petition Parallel, also known as PI. I thought it would be interesting, a couple of very short videos, a couple of minutes. I'd like to show them to you. One is kind of historical, one that gives us an idea of where the wireless industry is going, you know, as we speak. So we could do it. And I want to thank Mr. Simmons for helping me with the audio visual. A little bit more about it. That one stops in around 2013, asked what we're going to do in 2015. All those numbers you saw there are small compared to today. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate that. Let's see if I can get up. I can use this to advance. We crossed the threshold just last week. They announced that over 50% of all the people in the United States depend upon wireless phones only. That is, they do not have a wireline phone in their homes. And we know too that your 911 calls, over 85% of your 911 calls come in from mobile devices today. It is clearly the telephone system going forward. And it is clearly a very important utility to any community. I put together some slides. I'll move quickly through the slides. I'd like to convey why this site is so important, if I can. But first, introductions. T-Mobile, Darren Snodgrass, we've already met in previous meetings. Pi Telecom, also known as Parallel, and myself. T-Mobile is a very large mobile company, 45,000 employees. They have data services that reach over 293 million Americans, and their value statement is just that: of our plans, the breadth of our coverage, reliability of our network, and the quality of our service are meant to be one thing: help you stick together with the people and make your life come alive. That's why we're here. Darren Snodgrass. Darren is a site acquisition agent for T-Mobile. He's been working in the village of Cary. He has over 20 years experience in the acquisition and development of wireless facilities. And he's personally been involved in the development of over 2,000 sites. Darren formed TNG Wireless in 2013 to provide a full-service wireless site development and acquisition firm. He has a lot of experience. Pi Telecom Infrastructure is under contract with T-Mobile to develop property acquired by T-Mobile and its agents throughout the Midwest and Plains State. and they will be the tower developer for this project. That means they will build the tower, operate the tower, maintain the tower, and take care of leasing, which is called co-location on the tower. For myself, I was involved in the first wireless network in Chicago over 30 years ago. I continue to work on wireless telecommunication issues. I had a firm that was devoted to nothing but wireless telecommunication issues, and I served as the chairman up until January. I was chairman of the Illinois State Wireless Association Regulatory Committee, serving as the subject matter expert for zoning and local legislative issues. Why do we need a new cell site anyway? There's one answer, you can see the intense, it won't show up on the screen, but you can see the intense residential development. And essentially that is it. Your constituents are using wireless, phones and the applications that go along with them. And we are having service issues. T-Mobile's having service issues in the area. You'll see in the propagation maps I'm going to show you in a second, we have a huge hole of unreliable coverage, in the area due to large separation in existing sites. Actually, coverage is only one aspect. Today, it's capacity. Even when you have an initial system up, the capacity constraints on the system mandate that additional facilities be constructed. Customers have generated trouble tickets and complaints. Businesses have poor coverage, and neighboring cell sites covering this area are in need of capacity. The system is overloaded. The challenge is to find a site within the search ring that meets the separation requirements from the existing sites. Wireless facilities are not a single site source, like radio stations and TV. They depend upon a network, a mesh, if you will, of existing facilities. You already, the village carrier already reaches out space on your water towers. I commend you for doing it. I think it makes perfectly good sense. But there will be facilities coming before you that will not be able to provide service because either they're already on your water towers or it simply does not fit their grid, as we'll see in a minute. Now, here's the search ring that was issued for Cary. You can see that most of it is in residential areas to the north, to the south. It gets a little bit commercial. You can see where our site is located at the bottom of that ring. These are the surrounding sites. These are the sites to which the new cell site that we're proposing have to reach out and talk. Not so much the ones that are on your extreme right, but the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sites that surround this. And you can see that the site we've chosen is roughly in the middle of these other sites. It doesn't do us any good to locate a new site too close to an existing cell site or too far. And the engineer's job is to find a search ring, develop a search ring, in which, if we can find the site, it should reach out and touch to these existing sites and provide uninterrupted, coverage and capacity. This is what I'm ahead of myself. Let me see. This is the existing coverage, the white area in the middle. And this is what happens if we build a tower at 100 feet, which is what we are petitioning for now. That is a 30% reduction from the petition that was before you earlier. Now, the original petition was at 150 feet. The staff recommended then that it would be 100 feet. The ZBA recommended approval at 150 feet. And then, of course, we have reduced that height now back to 100 feet. There's an aerial view from half a mile up. You can see our site. I'll get a little bit closer. You can see the red dot down in the lower left-hand corner. And here's a close-up view of our site. You can see the surrounding, buildings, which will be identified in a minute. The Masonic Temple. You have the car, import and motor works, and then you have a marina, that's to the bottom. It's a very unusual site. Here's the overall site plan. You can see that we're taking our access off an existing driveway. There's going to be no changes at the street level. We put the site in the far back corner. It's a 70 by 70 foot compound to allow for other carriers to locate on this tower, which is precisely what you want to happen. If you're going to build a tower, you want it to be fully occupied and provide relief for other carriers. Here's a blow up of the site plan. There's nothing unusual. The first carrier building you can see there, and the tower is in the middle. And this is a picture of the elevation of the tower. Top is 105 feet, including the, the lightning arrestor on top. And it'll be built to house, 3 other carriers. Every municipality today requires that the wireless carriers provide co-location capabilities. So for the very same reason, aesthetically. And we should talk about aesthetics a little bit here, because I think it's very important. I took 7 photographs from 7 different locations. I don't know if you can read the numbers, but I'll go through it. This is across the street, looking across Northwest Highway at the Masonic Lodge and the high tension towers in the background. Our monopole would be in line with that second tower to the left, or actually it's the third tower to the left, directly in line with that and parallel with it. There's another site moved a little bit farther down Northwest Highway. Once again, looking a little bit farther down Northwest Highway. The only change in this area is that you permitted a Burger King to build in that corner. There was some concern at the Planning Commission that this installation would somehow inhibit development, but you've got 3 operating businesses there, and now you have 4 with Burger King. I don't see how we would interfere with business going forward. Here's another picture straight on. Again, the importance of having the Commonwealth Edison right-of-way there. You will never see this facility. This is a picture back in the lot. I'd like you to see the berm that's right behind the boats. That's a 10-foot differential in height. And on the other side of the Commonwealth Edison right-of-way are the only houses in the area. But our facility, all the ground level stuff, the fence, the buildings, will be below this berm. They'll see nothing but the shaft of that monopole, and they're looking through yet another tower that's just parallel to this one. Here's a view. I had to climb to the top of the berm to take this picture. That's that monopole I was telling you about. It's existing there. That's in addition to the big lattice towers that support the wires. This is a picture looking south rear of the marine boat storage. There's a 13-foot grade differential between our site and the marina's parking lot site. So it's a strange geography. In this case, the 13 feet helps us out, because the higher we are, the better signal propagation should exist. Here's another view looking toward the rear of Manfred's Auto Import Facility. You can see the 3 service doors, and you can get an idea of that drop-off. This property is, I can't see another development, for this property. And that's the end of the pictures. So what we are asking is that you allow us to file this new application at 100 feet and proceed, of course, to go back to the Planning Commission and then come back before you. But this is an important facility. It is rare that we find ourselves being able to locate a facility of this size without having virtually no aesthetic impact. And, it's, I hope you can see your way to allow us to begin this process again. Thank you.
Any questions for the petitioner?
Yes,
Could the tower be moved behind Manfred's or behind the lodge so that the buildings are hiding the bottom of that tower?
I'm not sure exactly how we could do that. I'm trying to get an overall site plan. I think it would bring it much farther up, closer to Northwest Highway if we tried to do that. I'm trying to get to an aerial picture here, maybe that'll help.
I did.
You can see on this aerial that where we've located this, there's that drop-off. There's a 13-foot drop-off. So, we could move it forward toward Northwest Highway, but I think that defeats what you're trying to accomplish in the way of hiding it.
I was just thinking parallel behind Manfred's. So you'd still be at the same elevation, but you'd have a building in front of it.
So we could move it north then? The north is at the top of the picture.
East.
Or more east? Well, I would have to talk to the property owner. I don't know. Maybe we could do that, yeah. But what would,
When you came,
okay. So you're saying that that's where the property drops off in 13 feet?
what I would ask is, I don't know if through the initial process, if you did any kind of mock-ups electronically showing what the tower would look like on the site that could be looked at, in scale.
I don't believe so, but we could certainly commission photo simulations and take that to the planning commission, let them, and they would eventually come back before this board as well, assuming that they will let us go forward.
How high was that third tower that's at the back, the ComEd
You know, I don't know what the height, I mean, apparently from looking at the other towers, it's much higher than 100 feet, I'm sure, but I don't know the exact height. 123 foot, yeah.
All right. I saw yesterday on going down Clazen Road, I saw on telephone poles, the wooden poles, I saw white antenna rods sticking up on multiple telephone poles. Are those repeaters or some kind of a cell
I'm not
transfer?
I'm not sure if you saw the same unit at multiple pole locations, it is probably a distributive antenna system, which can bring service into a very limited, narrow alley, byway, relieve some of the street traffic.
They
But it
don't
doesn't, I'm sorry.
They don't operate independently, though. They are required to be connected to a principal tower.
To the extent they can be used, they will be utilized. You know, there's no water tower anywhere near our site here. There's no other tall structure we can take advantage of. But we go like lemmings to existing tall structures because it makes our processing and petitioning so much easier. You know.
Chief, are we having any issues presently? 911 calls dropping or any communication issues that you're aware of?
And this, to be clear, I believe this is on the T-Mobile platform, right? So, I mean, I haven't personally heard of any, I didn't see any evidence in what was presented as to complaint files that tie to my residence. I don't know who's complaining, but I haven't heard of it. Chief?
No, I can tell you from my personal experience, I live close to Bridge and Three Oaks, and there's a deficit there. I know that we've had some issues with radio reception near the river because it's a low point. So, but in regards to, I couldn't tell you, you know, I think the ETSB uses Verizon service.
Mr. Riley, I just want to kind of backtrack a little bit. When we had the petitioner here last time and we turned down the petition, I believe that the reason it was turned down was because of the location. And the suggestion that was made was to go back further back into the commercial park behind there, the industrial park, and seek out people that would be interested in it. And I personally know of some that would be interested, and I believe those were passed along. So my question is, was that pursued? Did anybody look into that?
I'm not aware of where the industrial park is, but Darren certainly is and can address that issue.
I mean, am I correct? Does anyone remember that conversation that was about location?
Yes.
Okay.
We did. And we took it back to the RF engineers. They did a propagation, and it did not meet the criteria that they have to have in order to be able to do the handoffs to the sites that we're concerned about. So, yeah, because we did have a contact with someone that contacted my project manager, and he contacted me on that. I went down, took several different GPS readings from various different locations within that group, and we submitted those to the RF engineer, and they were declined.
And I believe that's the same answer vis-a-vis the Village Public Works yard.
Is that a height issue, though? Or is that, I mean, if you went higher with a pole, would that solve some of those issues?
You know, I'm not being an RF engineer, I can't really tell you exactly what the issues were. I do know that, you know, elevation is part of it, because it is a lower elevation over in that area. I'm sure that's part, but I also think when you start looking at down in that area, you're getting closer to the site that is CH16239A. That'll be approaching that area, and also possibly some interference from the CH.
6329.
Don't have my glasses, I'm sorry.
6329.
362, oh my goodness. I've been doing this too long. So yeah, I think that's part of the issues also as well.
You know, there are a few jobs that provide instant proof of success or failure than an RF engineer who is going to turn on a site that costs $250,000 to build, and within hours, they will know what kind of capacity relief it affords the surrounding cells. So, you know, they really are responsible to do it. The other point about building cell sites, you know, we only build cell sites, there's priorities. The priorities, and priorities generally are where the squeaky wheels are coming from, all the noise, all the complaints, all the problems. Otherwise, the money gets spent, you know, in another area. So I can, you know, if you wish, I can bring in the RF engineer at a future date, he can come in and testify, but he would tell you essentially the same thing, that, his height, could you build a tower higher? No, you can't go too high because then you cause interference with the cells that are closest to you. That's why it's an integration, if you will, of all these cells. And you can see it's almost dead smack in the middle of all those 5 cells. So,
Mr. Riley,
yes, sir.
does the green represent talking service or data service?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think it's probably a combination of both,
Right.
today. I can find out. This I know is, this is what he has programmed to be the improvement in, coverage and/or capacity, and they go hand in hand. So I can find out exactly what that, usually they blend the two together.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know if the map represents phone service and/or data service, and whether it represents in-building service or car service.
I will find that information out.
We can probably get information in regards to in-building versus
Yeah, I
the
know.
the various grades of pedestrian, in-vehicle, in-building.
I know it's available.
So-
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that graphing before, so I know we can get it. Yes, sir.
The paperwork that's in front of us, and maybe Chris, you could tell me, is this the existing, is this the previous application? I see.
This is a new application that I filed.
Could, page 68, we'll have to fix, because it says that
Yeah.
this will be
150.
built to a height of 150 feet.
I saw that too. I noticed that. I marked it.
It says it here.
Sure, it's just a
I'll
typo.
make that change.
All
Page
right.
68. Thank you.
And right here, subject property. Remember, he had subject properties we're talking about.
Pardon me?
It was right here, he had subject property.
Okay.
And is T-Mobile ready for 5G?
Well, T-Mobile, like everybody else, is scrambling for 5G. It's, we've lived through, this is the 5th iteration of, service, I don't even know what technologies. It's just, it's an indication of what's happening today. Both these videos I showed you are already out of date, but I like, how fast they move and, the information they portray. I had one that just came from the most recent PCIA convention, but it was more industry geared, and patting everybody on the back, so I didn't want to necessarily bring that in. But the bottom line, guys, is that, service is needed here. This is a great site, aesthetically. You're not going to see it, and it will take a lot of pressure off not only T-Mobile, but the other carriers are going to co-locate here. I can almost guarantee it right now. And the company who builds the tower, of course, wants to do exactly that. That is their business. They lease out vertical tower space. And they also maintain it, and they're also a single point of contact should the village have any concerns about the facility at all. But
I just have a question about this diagram right here. These are your antennas or T-Mobile's?
they are T-Mobile's antennas. They may be co-locations on other towers, may not be, they may not own all those towers, but they certainly are located on all those towers.
Okay, so I know there's another cell tower over somewhere by Lake Julian. And then on Three Oaks, our water tower, is that to capacity? Is that full? And I guess the next question would be, does T-Mobile lease any space on our water towers?
There is space available on Tower 2, and that's at Nighthawk and Three Oaks Road. So just right on the edge of the white that the petitioner has referenced.
How does that relate to the search area?
It's, so you're
It's further
saying
out.
you have to have an antenna within that ring, period?
That's exactly how the process
bottom
begins,
across.
with the issuance of this search. That's why Darren's job gets to be so difficult. Because, and it makes sense when you see the other sites. You see where they're located, it's almost a perfect concentric circle around.
What about Crest? What about Crest where we just, we're certainly not putting any more houses there, are we?
In terms of the location there?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the circle. I'm just curious.
Well,
It's right in the middle of a
The
residential.
grant terms would indicate that cannot be constructed upon.
Okay.
There is ComEd right away behind the
Okay.
properties we're aware of, and there'll be future projects out there, but I believe the covenants wouldn't allow us to do that.
Okay. Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
This is a permitted use up to 35 feet in the zoning district in which we're located. And, you know, we do meet the standards of your ordinance. You know, I have gone through them. I have hard copies. I didn't want to get too involved tonight or take too much of your time up, but, you know, the standards are a double-edged sword to the extent that if we don't meet the standards, then we shouldn't be approved. But if we do meet the standards, we should be approved. And clearly, I think we meet the standards there. So,
You meet the standard for a 35-foot tower, is that what you're saying?
you know,
Would you build a 35-foot tower there?
no, we would not
Okay,
build
so
a
what's the
35-foot
difference?
tower here. But I don't find that to be necessarily relevant when it is a self-imposed condition, you know, on a technology that, you know, it has no relevance to the wireless technology.
I would jump in and state that, you know, one of the comments the village trustees had when this was denied in the first place at 150 feet was the fact that there's about a 15-acre site across the street for future development. And there has, since you've been here, been some interest in the site expressed. And so there are other area issues that the board has to look at other than just what you're requesting.
Well, let me ask, is that site that's on the,
That would be,
It's that large open area.
to the south?
yeah.
But you still have 3 other businesses before you get to this tower that's snuggled up against the ComEd right-of-way. And you just approved a Burger King on the corner.
They
So,
came in and asked for a 150-foot tower, and they unanimously said no.
I
So now
understand
you're
that.
coming back for a 100-foot tower. I mean, it's up to the village board.
Can you comment, I've seen a number of installations where the tower is embedded in the ComEd high-tension pole.
Yes.
Somewhere in the materials, you said that it's inconvenient, but I've seen it done.
No, I've seen it done as well, and it wasn't a question of inconvenience, it's a question of if you can get cooperation from Commonwealth Edison to do it. In fact, their towers are much higher than 150 feet in order to clear the railroad tracks,
Sure.
you know, but I know, Darren, if we, you know, approached Commonwealth Edison in the beginning,
Yes, we approached Commonwealth Edison. There was another site, I think T-Mobile actually presented to either this body or the Planning Commission in regards to going on a Commonwealth Edison. It was denied also. And it was the aesthetics of the equipment at the base. So, yeah, we were not a party to that, so I wasn't a member of that group that did that research, but that's what we were informed. And Commonwealth Edison has also told us that the same thing. So the other issue with Commonwealth Edison, again, is the entire line has to be taken down to do any kind of maintenance. And so it is a very difficult situation no matter what, even at the best of cases. And they're very, very picky about where they allow it.
You know, for me, I just will say that I wasn't in favor of the 150. I'm not in favor of the 100, and it is an aesthetics thing. You know, I recognize you bring up all of the ComEd poles that are there, towers that are there, the other poles that are there. In a perfect world, I wouldn't like those there either. So to make it more busy, even though in your position is that your tower will blend in with an already busy area, I just don't accept that. To me, it will be busier, even though you're locating in a busy area. So I give you that, but it doesn't help me aesthetically. So I'm not in favor of it at 100. I wouldn't be in favor of it at 36. That's my position.
may I respond?
Sure.
Here's the quandary that we face then. Where else within that search ring would you approve of a tower of the necessary height? Say 100 feet for the sake of conversation.
I think we mentioned that last time in the industrial park, and I'm not sure
But
that's been
that's-
totally vetted
That's-
out.
I don't believe, is the industrial park in the search ring? It's not in the search ring.
But the search ring is a self-imposed limitation.
I was just.
Well,
Just like the 35 feet's a self-imposed
Well, it's
limitation.
self-imposed, but there's a little bit difference here. If you had your water utility here, and they said, we need to have a pumping station here, you would depend upon their technology and their engineers to establish the fact that they needed to have it there. And you probably wouldn't even question it. You would get involved in the aesthetics and what you're going to do with it, and the little generating station, same thing. So the wireless community comes, and they are an engineering-driven industry, technology, and they say, we have to have it in the search ring. And all of a sudden, everyone goes, well, that's self-imposed. Well, the engineer, I can bring the RF engineer in, and he can show you the data points, he can show you all the complaints and, the problems that they're having. But, the FCC has just recently ruled that we do not have to demonstrate need anymore. Yeah, interesting,
That's
isn't
not what
it?
the statute says.
Oh, well, there's, the FCC recent order came out in December of 2014, deals with that whole issue of proving need. I'll find the language for you, right? So, it's an interesting quandary, but I mean, what you're doing here tonight is exactly what municipalities have done since the beginning of time, and that's balance the impact of infrastructure against the need of your constituents. This need's not going away, folks. If it's not us standing here, you're going to have other people standing before you. And if we're having problems in the area with a range like that, there's no other tower within that search ring, I know for certain that the other carriers are having problems too. So, I think this is a very good solution, and I don't think if this tower is built that anyone's ever going to mention it. They'll never see it.
Why did you ask for 150 feet in the first place?
It was better from an RF engineering standpoint and gave us greater capability going forward for co-location possibilities with other carriers. So now they mount every 10 feet down on rad centers or 15 feet, whatever they can scrunch. The lowest guy is going to be 40 feet lower, and he's going to be at 60 feet. And it would be much better if he was at 90 feet, if the tower was 150 feet tall. It gives you greater capacity, gives the village greater capacity, makes it more attractive. That's
Believe it or not, I was at that meeting.
Could you state your name and address, please?
I'm Gary Fisher. I'm the owner of the property. I was at that zoning meeting, and the zoning department actually said, why don't you go 150 feet instead of 100? Because the other towers are already 150 feet. And Daryl says, well, I would prefer to go 150 feet. So that's how the 150 feet got in there. I'm just going to say something real quick. And I just switched to T-Mobile about 2 months ago. I own a business in Cary. My daughter owns a ceramic shop in downtown now. We've already switched back to Sprint. She can't even get phone service in the old bank in Cary. I can't get service back in the industrial park. So we've already just today had Sprint in there giving us deals. We're going to go back to Sprint again. And so there is a drop call problem in the town if you have T-Mobile. Maybe not with Sprint, I don't know, but with T-Mobile there is. And that's all I wanted to say, that there is a communication problem. You can't even get it right downtown Cary. I don't know if it's because the old bank has got thick walls and what it is, but she can't get any phone calls in there.
Why do you have to have the base of it, the enclosure, why does it have to be 70 by 70? A lot of the locks in our town are only 70 feet by 100 feet deep.
I think that the size is simply a derivative of having 4 carriers there, having 4 equipment buildings or 4 platforms with cabinets on them, and having the space to, move around easily. And if it was a tight space, could it be shrunk? It could be shrunk, but I'm not sure what you would gain by doing that in this instance, given how remote this corner is.
Mr. Riley?
Yes, sir.
I understand the economics, why they would prefer to have 4 carriers on there, because it allows them to recover the cost of the tower faster.
Sure.
But the village board's consideration is in respect to T-Mobile's need, and not the needs of the other carriers who aren't before us, and there's no evidence regarding their need.
Right.
So I guess I'd like you to present information, if you're given permission to go forward, as to what the minimum requirement is to serve T-Mobile's need, assuming there are no other carriers on the tower.
That's a fair question, and I can answer the question right now. I mean, it was a big deal for us to go back to T-Mobile and go, hey, we're going to reduce the tower height from 150 to 100 feet. But as you can see from the propagation, they're satisfied with that. So I don't know, if you're asking me if they would go lower, I could ask them if they would go lower.
I guess your plans demonstrate that you believe that other carriers would be satisfied at 90 or 80.
No, I'm not sure that they would be. And my honest recommendation to this body and any other body I would appear before in this capacity is that in this case, with the cover of all the surrounding areas, the towers and that are taller than this, you, for your own purposes, would want this tower to be taller than 100 feet. You want it to be attractive to the other carriers. You want them to flock to this tower. So it takes the heat off of this whole area, and it will. You know, to the extent, you know, the grids are not the same either. I have to, you know, Verizon's grid is a little bit different than T-Mobile's, and Sprint's is different than those two. So some of your towers are going to fall right on their grid, some are not. Some of these towers will fall on the grid, but as the systems develop and all the cell sites get closer and closer together, the likelihood that they're going to be able to use an existing tower increases, you know.
The one response I
exponentially.
give you to that, I appreciate that statement, but then in theory, we could be competing against ourselves with some of these other providers with our own tower equipment, our own water towers, without seeing their propagation maps. That's what that does.
Well, you can certainly request to see the propagation maps, and if you have a tower, but you're not going to allow a tower to be built a half a block away from your water tower. No one would expect you to do that. I mean, you control that process. So if they come in, if our search ring, if this search ring that I just showed you had a water tower sitting in the middle of it, I wouldn't have much to say, you know, but it doesn't, you know, and your towers will be used. I have absolutely no doubt that they'll be maxed out. It may not be right now, but in a couple of years, it certainly is, because the system, in order to provide capacity and coverage, they're estimating something like 100,000 cell sites are going to be built over the next 5 years nationwide. You know, this is not a process that's going to go away. So, and that's why my advice is you take advantage of sites that are not problematical, because you're going to have sites come before you where it's much more sensitive area than this. In the fact that it's all residential, but there's nothing there but big areas of schools or churches. So it's not an easy process.
Attorney Simon, do you see, I mean, ultimately the board's being asked to waive this 1-year rule.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any comments on that from a precedent standpoint?
The scope of relief is different than what they're seeking before. And so the ordinance requires the board to find there's a substantial change in circumstances, and that's not defined anywhere. So it's up to the board to determine in its discretion what represents a substantial change in circumstance. In this case, they're reducing the scope of the tower by a third. So I'm not aware of any precedent where this has been applied before, since I've only been here for a little while.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. Are we voting on the approval of this project?
No,
That's what I
we're
thought.
voting
I
on
just
just
wanted-
sending it back to the ZBA.
Right. Okay.
Sending a new application.
New
back to the
application
ZBA.
with the 100 feet. I need a clarification. You kind of contradicted yourself on a couple things. Was your original petition that you brought to the ZPA 100 feet, and then the ZPA said, why don't you go to 150 feet?
I was not part of the original petition. I'm not aware of that conversation. I only have the hard documentation before me, you know, and I know it was filed at 150 feet, you know, and I know that the engineering that was applied was at 150 feet. But and I know the recommendation from staff was 100 feet. So that, you know.
Okay.
The original petition, just to answer, was a 150-foot request. Staff's recommendation to the zoning board was based off other approvals that the village had approved in the past, had a limit of 100 feet for antennas for an industrial park. A business installed a radio antenna that was up to 100 feet. So staff's recommendation was a recommendation of denial of the request, but if the zoning board recommended approval, the recommended condition of 100 feet. And the zoning board, through deliberations, recommended approval of the 150-foot request.
Okay. Anybody else have any other comments or questions? What I struggle with the most is, you know, we as a board collectively are trying to enhance the village and our gateways. We just currently tonight looked at our entryway improvements, where we have a contract pending on one of the largest vacant sites on Route 14 right now. We do have a new Burger King. As a matter of fact, they were approved the same night you guys were denied. We look at, you know, that as being in a TIF district. This is a key development opportunity for us moving forward. We have people now kicking the tires. They're making more inquiries in the last 6 months than they have in a long time. I would ask Mr. Fisher, you know, he's going to give up a 70 by, I'm sure the property is much longer, but what's going to happen to the rest of that property? How will that impact any type of additional development that we see there? Because I was told at one time that a lot of those business owners are open up for a redevelopment opportunity if the price was right. So, looking at that being set right there in probably the middle of that whole tract of potential redevelopment, it's towards the back, but it's in the middle of the site from the high-tension wires to Jandis Cutoff. That's what I'm looking at, the possibility of, bringing in some new businesses that would want to relocate there and redevelop that area.
Two comments. When you have setback requirements for your district, but you also have the ability to vary them. You can push that tower as far to the north, against that right of way as possible. And the second thing is, any new business come into any town today, one of the first questions is wireless capabilities and connectivity. So one of the strongest things you have, is the ability to tell these people that you, yes, are going to have good wireless connections. And ask any real estate agent. I've been told 1,000 times, it used to be location, location, location. Well, location is quickly taking a backseat to access to the, internet and wireless capabilities. So, I understand it's a difficult situation to try and look into the future of what's going to happen there, but I don't see the Burger King going away. I mean, we just got to prove it's going to be built. And those other businesses, they may change out, and if they sell, but still, you got this tower that's back in the corner. They'll work around it. There are many instances where businesses and residential developments have built around the cell towers, just like they do around the water tanks, big water towers that go up. So I would not be concerned about it.
So if the property sells, does the contracts go with the property owner?
It can, or
It usually does.
cannot. It usually does.
It usually does.
Okay, and then if the new property owner says, hey, I don't want this on my property, you guys take it off?
No, I mean, because the company enters into a long-term lease with the property owner, and that lease would survive any sale that the property owner makes to a third party. So the lease would stay in effect. But, that's another reason it's difficult to find sites, is because you're asking a property owner to tie up his property for a long period of time.
But it's also very financially lucrative to have a tower on your property.
It is, yes. But I mean, that's no different than the boat guy running out space,
Correct.
storing his boats, or the car company doing repairs and storing the cars. Or, that's business. Right? He's lucky enough to have a site that falls within the search ring that has the qualifications. In the village, by the way, the village is a landlord. They're a big landlord to the wireless community. All your water tanks and water towers.
And that's, I wish we had a spot in the village that we could put this tower for the revenue source. Same with the billboards earlier when we were talking about them, that would be a potential revenue source for the village also. So I mean, this is just one more example of something that's out there
I don't want
that the village ought to be aggressive on and trying to locate sites that would benefit the village.
But, yeah.
Well, I gave it a lot of thought before I even signed the papers on the cell tower issue. You guys kind of put the icing on the cake when you put the Burger King in there because you took that corner and chopped it up. Now there's 3 little pieces left and there's only a couple acres of land there. Plus you gave the Burger King a place to go without even parking for their employees. So now they're renting from me. So they don't have to walk across Route 14 to get to their business. The whole thing is kind of messy. Yes, I'm lucky to have them want to be there. It could generate $200,000-$300,000 over 30 years. Now, I could sell that property for a couple $100,000 and get it tomorrow. I don't know what Maurice got for his property, but it was pretty high. I tried to sell him my piece of property. I tried to give it away because I'm paying, when a building burned down, I was paying $9,000 a year for a piece of property, taxes, that didn't even have sewer to it. I'm still paying over $5,000 a year in taxes on that little piece of property. I tried to give it to Maurice. I said, here, take it for $100,000. Take it for whatever make me an offer. Try to give it to All Marine. Take it, put your boat storage on it. Do what you want to do with it. I can't get rid of it. So when you take a piece of property like that and you wait and you wait and you wait, it's been 7 years since I burned down over there, and the village laughed at me and said, you can't rebuild here because now you're not grandfathered in. Now it's a retail slot. Well, what are you going to put there? It's in a TIF district. Anything that goes on that piece of property is going to have to go through the scrutiny of the village board, like Burger King and like I'm trying to do now. And I've been sitting there waiting for this thing These guys come in and offer a cell tower, which isn't even going to destroy the property. It's going to be all the way in the back. And like he said, there's still enough room. There still would have been plenty of room, but that whole corner there, if Burger King wouldn't have taken the most prime spot of the whole corner, you chopped it up. What's Manfred going to do? He wants $1 million. Strike wants millions of dollars. Everybody wants $1 million for the property, and it's only worth a few $100,000. We all know that. So now we're all going to sit there and wait for year after year after year and pay all these taxes for what? So, I mean, I'm just stating my point of view because I didn't want to necessarily put a cell tower on it either. Because I got to wait 30 years for my money. I'm going to be gone in 15. But, you know, the point is what else can you do with it? You guys, I thought, had an idea for that corner. But then when you chopped it up at Burger King, that idea kind of went out the window as far as I'm concerned, because I don't know what's going to happen. Everybody's got a little piece of pie there. I've got the driveway that goes out to Route 14. It's an easement.
Are you saying that you're interested in selling the property?
Oh, I'd love to have sold that property 7 years ago. I've been trying to sell it for 7 years.
Okay.
But there's no interest over there. You know that. I mean, everybody knows that. Look how long that Selke's property's been sitting there.
Director Simmons, is that in the TIF district? So it's in the TIF district. Okay.
Yeah, I am in the TIF district, but I can't see where a 70-foot by 70-foot area back there is going to hurt the sale of the property. If the Masonic Lodge had to get sold and they wanted my property because they needed a little more and they wanted Manfred's, and they get a cell tower that's going to pay them for the next 30 years, I would think that would entice somebody to buy that property, not hurt it. Because they take the cell tower and get the income off of it. So I can't see where putting a cell tower up there is going to hurt the value of that property. Can't do anything but help it. Because now I've tried to sell it for $100,000. Now to me it's worth $300,000 because that's what I'll get over 30 years, to $1,000 a month or whatever, you know. I mean, so I mean it's just up to you guys. I don't care. You know. I really don't. I've had a lot of issues with the village of Cary, and I don't even want to get into it, but from putting a slop sink in and have the engineers laugh when they walk out the door to putting a $30,000 impervious patio in that I had to go through all pull strings for. So I don't, you know, I told these guys when they came in, lots of luck. But I'll go for it, but lots of luck. But then Burger King got their way.
But that was one of my hesitations, though, with Burger King. I didn't want to approve Burger King, but then when I found out that it was, because I mentioned that, I thought that corner was a good corner for being redeveloped. And one of my reasons that I did approve it was that it was that construction, you know, that they're bringing in the prefab construction. So it'd be an easy thing to take out of there if somebody came along and wanted to develop that corner.
Perhaps the village should buy the property back in the corner, and then they could develop that for other, you know, wireless carriers and get the income.
Could give it to the lodge.
No.
There's a comment from the audience. Did you want to come up and state your name and address, please?
Yeah, I'm Mary Rouse. I live at 421 Krenz. This property where it's being proposed, to me, you're not even going to notice it. It backs up against the railroad tracks. It's behind an existing building. Sure, the tower will be 100 feet, but I drive through there all the time, and I doubt that I'd even notice the tower even being there because you already have all the towers around there. And it's saying you've got it busier, you won't even notice it. But I have T-Mobile, and it does, my whole family does, and we do get dropped in town. So it is something that is needed here, but the village is worried about making money because they do it off their water towers. Charge them a percentage. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with the village saying, well, the tower can go in, but we want a certain percentage of whatever. You know what? They do it all the time.
Can't sell
It's-
zoning.
It's called taxes. Charge them a tax.
We can't sell zoning.
Well, I don't know. You know, It's
Thank
an
you.
option.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the petitioner? This is a vote that would authorize sending them back to the ZPA. Roll call, please.
Chapman?
Yes.
McAlpine?
No.
Kraus?
It's just going back to zoning and planning. It was approved the first time, so, yes.
Dudek?
No.
Cavelli?
No.
Kozler?
Yes.
No.
No.
Moving to administrators report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have one item. There's been some discussion from the last village board meeting on June 7th regarding where the village is at with the Meyer material agreement, what's happened since June 1st of 2016 when the original mining deadline date was passed. And so I put together a quick presentation to lay out how we're operating under the 2008 agreement. And then there's been some discussion about considering potentially a new petition, and I can give you a briefing on that with current information from today. First item on the update is the impact fees that have been paid to the village since the inception of the agreement in 2008. The $2.25 million that's been paid is short $250,000 that is not due as per the original agreement until June 1 of 2017. All fees been paid on time. There isn't in our legislation a requirement for it to go to the Vehicle and Equipment Fund. In practice, it has been dedicated there and been left there ever since. It's helped to build a balance in the fund that's at about $1.5 million today. And we continue through a replacement cycle to replace vehicles throughout the fleet. I try to backtrack back to 2008 as to what the net $1 million proceeds that has been spent that's not in balance has equated to. It's roughly been 10 police vehicles. Probably about 8 of those are squads and 7 public works vehicles, many of which are over $100,000 apiece that were due for replacement. Land Conservancy fees are in balance, been paid in $1.8 million. Those were designed to be reserve funding for future maintenance and/or construction on the site from a standpoint of post-reclamation, how the village might use it, program it. This is a savings account for that. It's got about a $1.75 million balance. Less than $50,000 has been spent of the Land Conservancy amount on site planning. The fund continues to build with interest. It's missing a $200,000 payment that's yet due June 1 of 2017, unless circumstances change. Item 3, this was done at the beginning of the job, 2008, 9, and 10. 3 payments were made for a multi-use path connection that didn't exist before, that was funded through the Meyer deal. Path was completed in 2010. They've paid in this year, since the May 17th denial of the new agreement proposal that was brought forward through the process, they have made on-time payments of $450,000 just prior to June 1st, $250,000 for the vehicle and equipment allocation, and $200,000 to the Land Conservancy Fund. They did pay subsequently a mining penalty fine for mining in June. We did, through staff work, verify there was mining. It's our opinion and legal opinion that if they mine a day, they pay for the whole month. We verified that in early June, and they paid in June for that. And based on what I've been told verbally, they expect to pay, unless circumstances change, July, August, September, October, likely November of 16. Meyer, as I indicated, expects to mine this year. They don't have to. I mean, it's a verbal. There's no real requirement. So presuming that they did, there'd be $600,000 in penalties this year, coupled with the $450,000 that was owed under the original agreement. It's $1,050,000. The penalty revenues, we will have to determine at some point how to allocate them. We've put that essentially in a bucket line item account reserved from the other pay-in amounts that have been previously delegated by legislation to funding accounts. The penalty revenues are in an isolated account until you decide what to do with them. Meyer will not, and doesn't appear, is going to firmly forecast future years under the current agreement. I've asked, repeatedly a variety of questions about, well, how they handle it now. They know that there are some deadlines tied to June 1 of 2018 with restoration, even though they appear to be willing to absorb penalties this year, possibly next, possibly beyond. There's been some discussion about equipment. There hasn't per se been equipment brought to the job site in the last 30 days that's new, but it's coming. No word about a second drag line, but certainly their wheels are turning about other equipment coming to the job site. They have a market for what is out there that they can get out now. The economy is such with various contracts with the tollway, others. It's a good time for construction. Will that be the case in 17, 18, 19, beyond? I don't know. It is today, and they seem to want to get it out of there with what they do have, so that they're willing to eat these penalties and proceed. The other question that has come up is the denial, in terms of the end mining. I just don't know, when they're going to end mining. I don't know that it's going to be 17. I don't know that it's going to be 18. Clearly, there's a June 1, 2018 date. Clearly, there's a second penalty phase that comes in thereafter. Will that matter? Depends on the market. Depends on what their sales are. Depends on what the value of that commodity is, and what the spreads are in that, and how much demand do they have to get it out. The grading plant, prior to actually this June 7th asked to reconsider possibly considering a new proposal for Meyer. I had dialogue with Meyer and continue to almost daily, about what's going on. And I've asked a number of questions about the grading because as per board direction, we were asked from February to present to work on a conceptual park plan, which is interesting, but primarily that was done in real time, other than to show the possible future use needing, millions of dollars of potential grants. The goal was, okay, so if this ever happens, how does the grading of that site get left now so that whether it be through this 08 agreement approach or a new approach, how do we get the most out of the labor and equipment that's down there? Mm-hmm. And so we created targets with our staff, our Hitchcock design consultant, Eric Morimoto, myself, to set those markers. And when the denial occurred in May, the reality is, then the question is, well, are they going to follow these? I've started the dialogue of asking them, yeah, I'd like you to follow them anyways. They know that that's how I feel about it on behalf of the village board. I don't have firm answers yet because they don't have to give them to me. They know how we feel about it. I think there's mutual agreement that, yes, this 2008 Patrick Engineering Plan exists. It's a 20-page document with, 2 inches of exhibits. The issue is the recession happened. They didn't hit the targets. That's their problem. But there's a lot of unknowns that were forecasted in 8 in these various diagrams that don't necessarily apply today because the lake's not where it was supposed to be. Bottom line is there's some housekeeping there. This diagram indicates some conceptual deal elements that could become a part of a new possible extension petition. I did talk to Meyer today, and they may well bring within the next week a new petition request in. This may or may not be what's within it. It's certainly still subject to discussion. I'll say that there isn't a lot of room for movement in my estimation from what you saw in May. There's some ability to tweak different elements. I don't see wholesale changes being received by the other party, right or wrong. That's my assessment. So these are, elements of what I think you should at least be thinking about. Obviously, you don't have to comment. You can't comment. You don't have to because you haven't seen anything from them yet. But I expect that they'd ask to go back to zoning immediately, waive the 1-year cooling off period as we previously discussed on the prior case with the cell tower. They'd like to be heard now and be heard by you and this board and this zoning board. I would expect that the economics aren't going to change much. You remember the 2.1 million factor that was considered. You know, they paid in 450 on June 1 of 16, so that's already off book. This fifth bullet point here that says 1.050 million plus the 600,000, that's 1.65 million. If you add 450 to the 1.65 million, you're at 2.1 million. It's the same metric on math for this. It's basically locking in front-loaded quasi-penalty payments now, which the question is, why would we do that? If they're paying them now and it might be a little more rounded up on the penalty side, why would we do this now? One of the reasons is because you'd be locking it in now, and you don't know what the market's going to do from a commodity standpoint. It could go dark, you know, next year, and they might already be locked into this. You might want to consider that. It does appear they can sharpen up the what had previously been discussed in May 17th is October 31 and 19 ending all of the activities. They can sharpen up some more to July 1, clearly. And, you know, they've already said that out loud. I'll believe it when I see it in writing. Many of these other deal points were what you saw in May. The one change that I think is on the table is, well, now if they come in with a new petition, penalties have been paid. And clearly, I mean, if you just the workout schedule, you have to decide what's appropriate, so does the zoning board. But if this was brought to you July 5 for you to consider sending it back through zoning back to you for a recommendation for the village board, it could conceivably by calendar come to you July 5, you say send it back to the process, it hits the zoning board in early August, you know, best case, they're back to you early September. So at that point, they've already had to deal with penalties for June, July, and August. It's $300,000 that they owe and acknowledge that they owe. And, you know, depending on when this would be agendized in September, you know, September's up for grabs. The issue is that's cash in hand. And, you know, clearly if they come back, you know, you'll have to talk with them about that. But there's been a request for some additional capital financing for the subdivision. Some of that was addressed in the original agreement, but one of the feedback comments, which is fair and valid from the residents, is we want more. I think the penalty provision, cash in hand, could be a way to do that. And, you know, you got to decide if that's important. You would decide what penalty dollars could be used for. You know, that's up to the board, but that may be in play. I think, you know, essentially in these discussions over the past weeks, I think the 2 points that are a bit different are, one, they seem to be able to sharpen the pencil to get to July 1 of 2019. And second, there appears to be about $250,000 in play that wasn't May 17th. Beyond that, I just don't, you know, you can ask anything. I'm just giving you my assessment. I think, you know, the parties have found, you know, their spot, and either there's going to be some reconsideration or not, and if there's not, that's up to you, and that's fine, and then it just plays out through the original agreement. The mining ends when it ends, and what comes in, comes in. We try to get the best situation we can with grading, no guarantees, and, you know, we deal with it. So we're happy to answer any questions that you have, any other feedback. There is no petition in hand tonight. Could be at the next board meeting for the agenda, you know, and I'm happy to speak to this in any way you would ask. Thank you.
You know, Chris, thank you for that overview, by the way. I think it's helpful. Brings back a lot of conversations from almost 10 years ago. You know, the more I think about the penalty collections or the impact or non-impact to the residents of Fox Trails, you know, I just kind of wonder, and I know there's been some folks on the board that haven't been in favor of this, but if there is some sort of mechanism that we may have available to us, and I don't know what it is, I'm just talking out loud, but some sort of a mechanism that either through the village's portion of a resident's tax bill in Fox Trails, or literally like the homeowners assistance program was before, be able to give financial relief to that whole community, not pick and choose. You know, we didn't pick and choose before, but it was up to the residents in there to make an investment in their house up to $7,500. We had $1 million to dish out. Not everybody did, but all those that did got paid. I'm just wondering if there is, whether it's the 300, 350, 450,000, I'm not sure what the real number is and where all the sources would be, but if there is a way to be able to set aside some dollar amount of money that could get back to the property owners in Fox Trails. All the other stuff that I see here, in my opinion, is positive for that community. You know, a final grading plan that's really and truly memorialized. The first one, it's questionable if it's really what we would have liked. We didn't have any sort of ongoing potential maintenance for the lake. In this scenario, what you've been talking about now is that property on 31 coming in and the tax dollars that eventually will come from that, and they will eventually, not day one, but eventually, would be set aside for ongoing maintenance. Right now, we don't have a sinking fund for that. This does bring the project a year sooner. So these are all benefits, you know, not only to the town, but to that community. Nonetheless, I've heard, you know, on so many occasions, the assertions made by people in that town that are in that community that their homes aren't worth what they were worth before all this started, and it's difficult to sell. I don't know if that's true or not true, but that's what we've heard. So I guess I just look at it and say, you know, these extra funds, if any sort of extension was ever granted by the village board, would be nice for us to have, because we got plenty of things to use them for. But I guess I would like to explore any sort of viable way to be able to get a sizable, significant chunk of money back to the 130 people that live in that community.
The answer is that through some sort of rebate program that would be possible. The concept of a tax abatement as a non-home rule community is not possible through the property tax bill. However, a rebate program is possible. Staff's opinion would be that it not model the 2008 version, not from the standpoint of dollars invested, but the application process and for what it could be applied for. We wouldn't recommend to replicate. It's done. The rebate concept, if you want to call it that, would be some proof of property ownership at certain dates and some sort of even, you know, flat fee, you know, rebate back on a per address basis that isn't variable by EAV. Most likely, probably a flat amount is the concept. There are other iterations of that that could be debated. Obviously, it would need to be discussed from the standpoint of, well, what should be the bucket of the size of that bucket and where does that come from? You know, that may be up to you because as I've indicated, one of the entanglements that was in the May 17 agreement was that there's $50,000 in from Meyer coming directly to the village for the subdivision. The new petition's going to take that out, and we would have more flexibility using the penalty model to control it completely and not have it weighed down by other entities and other entities such as Meyer saying, well, we don't think you should use it for that, or we don't think you should use it for this. I mean, the village board would have full authority to decide that, to add to it, to subtract from it. You know, that's the most flexible option. Obviously, there's more legal that we would need to do if this carries forward. I would just suggest that, you know, if this is somewhat of the linchpin, you know, as well as the date of mining, as a board, focus on those things. Decide now if that is what it is. If it's other things, let's talk about it tonight, you know, July 5th. I don't think this should go back through the process for no reason. I mean, if the idea is to just leave it alone, then leave it alone. There are some ways to continue to thread a needle here, but I think that it should be addressed, you know, either tonight or on July 5th, you know, and make a certain decision.
I thought we made a decision on May 17th.
But at that time, at the following board meeting, I believe it was proposed if they were to come back, would we be willing to listen to that? And I think everybody had said that they would be willing to listen to that. Nothing, not approve anything, but listen to what the,
I didn't.
Yeah, what I said, and I said in my email today, is I'm open to them coming back with a new proposal. I didn't say I was open to deleting the 1-year restriction. So,
well, we have yet to see a new proposal.
well, and I guess that's the point. I mean, are they actually pursuing a new proposal, or are we offering a new proposal?
No, we're not offering,
We're not-
that they are pursuing and they are writing a proposal. And I believe that it'll come in next week. And I mean, the fact is, let's be clear, I mean, the rule of 1 year exists, and it can't be heard if you're not going to hear it. So it makes no sense to write it if it's not going to be heard. And that was the dialogue that came up on June 7th.
So can I just, Jim, I'd like to ask you a question. And I thought you had a very well-written email today. This is not easy for anybody. Not easy for me. I'm very passionate about it. I see certain reasons to want to do this, but I clearly understand, the people that aren't in support of it. I have to tell you that from the May 17th meeting, my biggest disconnect with the no votes is just really very simple. Why would you be against just sending it back to the ZPA? There is clearly new evidence that has been introduced. I think even subsequent to that, with some of the stuff Chris has talked about tonight, there may be even more new evidence. To your point, we haven't seen a new proposal from Meyer. So what harm is it to just send it back to the ZPA for Meyer to present something that none of us have seen? I have had a real struggle with just that disconnect.
I would say that, and as we've heard, as your new zoning board with new membership has started to get together for maybe maximum 2 meetings, I mean, they're going to ask why, the zoning board. And I mean, and especially if it ends up being the same situation at the village board, they have a justified reason to ask that.
The
You know what I-
ZPA does.
Yeah.
And
And
don't
I
you
mean,
think
I'm-
you have plenty of new reason?
Well, I mean, I understand, but I mean, the reality is that I think there ought to be some thought on the board's level that there is new evidence and there might be a reason to really look at it. If it's just going through the motions, I don't think
Yeah.
the village board, the zoning board, the Meyer material want to do that.
So a shorter agreement by a year, additional penalties and funds, do we not consider that significant change? I mean, I'm speaking for
Well,
myself,
I mean,
I guess I do.
there's 2 aspects. One aspect is the case you made on the 17th of May was, well, what's new that came in from the February zoning board hearing to the May 17 village board denial? And you said the park plan that was asked for by the board that was developed during that process didn't exist in February. Second, the park plan generated these grades that we talked about earlier that were desirable if there was some thought that there might be a park. That was a target that could get added and clarified. It was in discussion and to some extent in dispute with Meyer during this period. Third, the initial petition asked for dates of June 1, 2020 to cease operations. That shortened up during the dialogue. Those are the reasons that you had said, maybe this should get sent back and maybe Meyer should consider refiling. Since the June 7th meeting, June 7th to now June 21, dialogues happened with Meyer because the first question is, what's the point in the village board even getting, to consider it if there isn't any interest on behalf of the petitioner to even file it? And the first conversation I had with them was exactly that. Well, why would we do that? I mean, didn't it just go through zoning? Didn't it just go through the village board? Why would we do that? And the answers are the same things. I mean, the new components that were part of it and the feeling on behalf of some of the board members that not just that, but there some elements to tweak that might address some of the citizen concerns that weren't addressed between February of 2016 and May of 2016. And I'm telling you that since June 7th, the two, I guess, movable points appear to be that July 1, 19 date and some amount of funding that we may already have in our pocket that could be allocated towards this neighborhood, concern, whether it be a rebate program, whether it be some kind of a improvement program you control. I mean, there's more capital there. I don't believe there's more than what's on the table here. And this is on the presumption that there's some kind of decision in September. If this drags out and it's longer and there's more penalty money that comes in, I think that's going to be in dispute by them to us saying we want some of that back. I'm just trying to help kind of crystallize what we're doing so that we don't just do something because it seems easy tonight and then, we sit here for 3 months of meetings and we end up in the same place.
Yeah, and I'd like to respond to Trustee Dudick. You were asking me, why shouldn't we send this back to zoning? And the point I was trying to make in the email is it's a public perception issue. How do we get around that? And if you can answer that without the public going, why are they bringing this back after the board already denied the petition?
So would you say, when you say public perception, do you mean the public perception really of the Fox Trail residents or the public perception? Because to me, those are really very different, Jim.
I think they are different because those living on the east side of Cary aren't as engaged on this topic as those in Fox Trails. But you can't tell me that the people in Fox Trails don't communicate with other people in this community. So if we burn them, that circulates. And then the next thing you know, people are doubting what our board's doing.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you. And that's why, to be candid with you, one of the reasons I wanted to send this back is so there could be open dialogue about it and not stuff that potentially could be done where nobody's aware of what's happening. There's been times where people have made assertions that things happen behind closed doors. I heard it on the prior board I was at and even probably 2 boards before that. This is a really important decision, and it's a big project for the community, not just for the 130 homes in Fox Trails, but for the community of Cary. This corporate citizens already have given us over $4 million and, how many cars running around that they've paid for. So to me, I don't want it to be behind closed doors. I want it to be done in the open. I want the feedback from the people that live in the community. And some of the stuff that I've heard, maybe you guys, particularly Kim, since she lives there, has heard more, but I've always heard, the dust, the dirt, this and that. So if I can bring it closer to fruition by roughly 18 months from the original agreement, I have to believe that's a benefit to the people that live in that community. If there is some way to utilize some of these funds to rebate, to abate, to whatever the proper term might be, to compensate them for that, what's the right word I'm looking for? The fact that they have to live through it, even to a shortened date, I'd like to do that. And if there are other things that they tell us they would like to see us do, if those are possible, I'd like to incorporate those as well. None of that will happen if we don't have the forum. And that's the reason I wanted it to go to the ZPA. I don't have a preconceived notion of a final deal at all. I have ideas of what I'd like to see. You see some of it here because I've communicated it to Chris. But I want to hear what other people have to say. That's why I wanted to go out to the ZPA again.
That's a discussion for village trustees to have. What I just will add is that, whether it be since February when this project, began in review mode or since May 17th, what I see is that you don't have a firm date for this ending. And that is what the neighbors are upset with. And no, they don't want to see Meyer get 1 ounce more than they have to get. Nobody clearly does that testified. But, when the dates of mining seem to be the issue and the dates of mining can't be pinned down under the current state, the issue becomes, how do we change that? And if we don't want to change it, then we live with whatever it is. And if it's 18 or 19 or whenever that mining ends, then it ends then. And if we haven't received, maybe we don't want, improvements out there like had been envisioned in 8, and that's fine if you don't. Once that window's closed, it's closed. And I just don't see any sensible financial reason the Village of Cary is going to go back in there and redo work that wasn't done through this grading process. And that's fine if we don't want to do it, but you got one shot, and it's now. If we choose not to do it and we want it to be more of a passive use, that's fine as well. But coupled with the fact that the mining may be not far off from what was, proposed anyways, maybe by 6, 12 months, that's part why it's brought forward separate from, also wanting to be highly concerned about not wanting residents that were here, at the Holiday Inn, they were at the zoning board meeting, they were at 2, 3 village board meetings. I'm very concerned about them feeling like they got a mixed message. That's absolutely valid. It's just the reality we have as administrators, as board members, as we know that they want it done, and we're sitting here in limbo again because of deal terms that were written down in 2008 that may not have considered all of this.
I just want to add one thing to Trustee Dudek saying, I haven't heard really anybody recently saying anything about behind closed doors meetings or anything like that associated with this. That may have been.
Not with this, no.
May have been accused years ago, but not recently. So what I'm getting at is the perception issue is that as trustees, we should be getting the best deal for the community. And when we turn down a deal that should have been the best deal, and now we're finding out it wasn't, what do we do then? How do we look?
Yeah, I mean, and I can appreciate that. I will tell you that, and this is perspective, frankly, I'm the only one here that has. When we did the 2008 agreement, Jake, you were around, right? So I am the only guy who's here. And you can take it for what it's worth, Jim, you could research it, but in McHenry County, I believe there might have only been one other homeowners assistance program that had been put out at that time. That was a very, very unique strategy that we had to try to address for the people in Fox Trails, the inconveniences that were perceived through this project. And my recollection is probably easy enough to go back, or maybe not so easy to go back to some of the records, but the model that we put together for the $1 million, the maximum $7,500, that was used for a while as a model for McHenry County. It was the most innovative plan at that time. The only reason I'm suggesting that is that's almost 10 years ago. Half an hour, 45 minutes ago, we had a guy give us a bunch of information about technology saying that things change. Well, you know what? Things do change. And when we sat down in 2008 and came up with that agreement, I've already said, I was part of the group that didn't think about how are we going to maintain it, right? I was part of the group that said, we don't have a good final grading plan. Well, shame on me, and I raised my hand and admitted that. I really think that, to your point, really more than anything, this is an opportunity for us to maybe take away from the perception of we don't always do the right thing and actually do something that's going to be better for the people in Fox Trails.
And then in real time, I can answer that, it's not a criticism. It's just when we have a board, we have had it because of flat out democracy. I mean, the Pearl case is a good example. We have 4 people view it one way, 3 another. That's fine. But you don't have as much leverage in negotiations when you have a split group, and you didn't hear, and it is what it is. And trustees were good about it, even those that, for the most part, weren't real wild about this in the Meyer deal. They were good about it. It's like, yeah, I probably don't like this, but here's some things that might, be good for the village. And we tried to accommodate what we could pin down and define to the extent possible. And the date of the ending of it, in 2019 was up for debate, and it was the hardest thing to set because we were concerned that if the original dates, as you remember, all ended on June 1st, and that if it ended June 1 of 2019, the concern was there's not a growing season to see some of this landscaping that's supposed to come in, all of the flat out slop around the sidewalk, the parking lot, all of that mess that would be tracked up. We wanted to see it from a QA/QC standpoint and have, hopefully up to Halloween or Thanksgiving, to let it grow, because at that point, it's just housekeeping stuff, it's not mining. So, I mean, that was added through this ongoing process. It can be backed off. I think that if they do file a petition, I think most of the physical mining is going to be done by Thanksgiving 18. I just do. I think 19's cleanup. And, you know, it's just a question of whether you want to get down the path or not and pin it down now. You know, clearly they can come back. I made the point at the last meeting, they can come back to some different board possibly a year out. It's not a threat, it's just reality. And I mean, you know, a number of people might not be here at that point that went, you know, through this with the village board. And, you know, that just is the way it is. I don't know what they're going to do. They've asked questions about that. They asked questions of me about, all right, what did you say at the last board meeting on June 7th about there being an election in April of 17, and what does that mean? I mean, all they're doing is their homework on, you know, what their options are and how this could play out. And all I'm trying to do is, because you've directed us collectively to try to, how do we pin this thing down and end it to the best that we can in light of the facts we have. So that's the end of what I need tonight. And if it comes back to you on July 5th, you got a heads up on it. We'll try to agendize it as soon as we can. We're cognizant of the fact that we need to notify the residents. So thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? When you mentioned there was the 250,000 more than the original agreement, is that including the fines and penalties that have been paid so far? Is that
Well,
separate?
good question. I made an assumption that, you know, this would be acted upon at your board level in September. And that, you know, and I already engaged them in conversation because I want to make sure we're trying to get the best value for us that the board wants. Whether you spend it on Fox Trails or keep it, I think you get 300,000 out of it, June, July, and August. As it gets later than that and you're paying a $500,000 penalty, you know, they're getting concerned about that. And you might tell them that's too bad. You didn't get approved. And so I'm saying that it's 300,000 minus the 50 that was in the May deal.
Right.
That's the 250.
Okay,
That's been
so-
added economically.
So it's not necessarily new, it would just be the penalties that they
Yeah,
pay.
I mean, that is new cash that didn't exist in May, and they're shrinking the schedule from theoretically October 31st, which was a verbal on the May 17 meeting, to July 1. So they're shrinking the months of activity and paying more money through the penalties, which you're correct, the penalties are possibly, you know, should be considered separate from the rest of it. But, you know, it's going to be a negotiation, and, you know, we'll just need to decide what's most important.
Jim, can I ask you a question? Is Myers, is that one of the companies here in Cary that you consider lacking in ethics and honesty as per the email that you sent today?
I didn't appreciate them not being forthright about their mining activities, yes.
And was I one of the members of the board who voted yes to petitions brought by those lacking in ethics and honesty? I mean, you didn't say anybody's name, but I sure would like you to say those names now, if you don't mind, in public.
I don't have to say names. That was put out there for you to self-evaluate.
And my point is that it's your opinion, and I really wish you had written, now, in my opinion, anybody that has anything to say about anything that I have done on this board, you're welcome to come and talk to me about it. As far as manipulation, as far as being bought off, as far as being
Hold on.
corrupt.
I didn't say any of that in my email,
Well,
so don't.
It
don't start
says
throwing out
manipulation, which leads us back to the trust issue. Jim, you do not own the trust issue. And you can't own the trust issue because it's your opinion, all right? And to accuse anybody else of not having it, I find it to be disingenuous, and I found it to be very hurtful. And I wish you would apologize. I don't know if you will,
So
but
wait,
I wish
when
you
you
would.
vote yes for a petitioner who tries to attack my character and make up things that were totally inaccurate, then that's okay in your opinion?
No, it's not.
Well, you did.
And it wasn't because of that we
But that's what I'm
voted yes.
saying. So my point is valid.
Jim, we have to vote for what is in the best interest of the whole village of Cary. Even those ones
Even
that are
if
on
they
the other
lie.
side that are not.
Even if they lie to us, we have to vote for what's
No, Jim.
That's what you just said.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
I guess I'm going to say something. And I tried to write it down because I don't like this at all, some of the things that goes on with the board. So I too would like to respond to the email sent by trustee Costler this morning where he elaborated on his stance regarding Meyer Material. While I'm appreciative of every one of us sharing information and points of view that enable us to further investigate issues and make well-informed decisions, I'm thoroughly disappointed by what I perceive to be a lack of respect for your fellow board members and petitioners that have come before this board since your tenure. To quote you, Jim, you quote unquote said he can cite many examples of which members of this board voted yes to petitions brought by those lacking in ethics and honesty. I simply do not feel that this is appropriate, justified, nor a positive reflection on Mr. Kostler, and it disappoints me. When I first read the email, I can honestly say that I was pretty angry that he was calling anyone in this board's integrity to question, as I believe that each one of us up here are doing what we feel is for the betterment of our village and its residents. Not to mention petitioners that come before our board seeking some type of relief or remedy to either personally improve their situation or our town. I know that each of us comes from a different perspective, and that's a good thing, as we should stand on our own and make decisions that we feel are best without fear of retribution or such insults. Again, I would love to say that if someone's misinterpreted what you were trying to say, Jim, if that was me, I would apologize and say, I'm sorry if that's misinterpreted. But I'm going to tell you that I felt very offended by it. And I feel that you're really putting, it's inflammatory to people that have come here and don't have the opportunity to defend themselves. I don't know who you were talking about, all of it. I can make assumptions, but I don't know. But that's a very blatant statement, and it's really uncalled for in that type of format. If you have an issue, I read your email, I thought, what a great email, until I got to the bottom, and I'm like, what? I just don't understand where that comes in. You know, it's kind of like there are times in businesses where changes do come about, whether it be something like Liberty Signs, who said a year ago they were going to come and they were going to make improvements to their signs. And then they came up with a different technology, so they thought, I'm going to put it on the back burner. I don't look at that saying that they're unethical or that they've done something that they've not been forthright with us, because they did sit here before the board and say that's what they were going to do, but they didn't. I am definitely in support of that. I'm not going to vote against it to say, oh gosh, they misled us or they were not truthful, because I don't view it that way. I view it as if sometimes businesses have to adapt. So my concern with that, Jim, is that I think you have to be careful. You put out something in writing like that that's voyable, and if I'm someone that's brought a petition before this board that you voted against, I may want to come up here and ask you to defend that position why you put something like that out there. I just think, whether it was your intention or not, I think it came across
I don't understand what's so
improperly.
bad about what I said, that I would not vote yes for a petitioner that was lying to the board.
No,
That's a bad thing.
No, what I think is bad is that you made it sound, your quote unquote was, that you can cite many examples in which members of this board voted yes to petitions brought about those lacking in ethics and honesty. And then you went on a little bit further to say that it's manipulative and that you would not do something like that. There could be situations, and I think each one of us are called to view everything on its own merits, And someone might say something that might offend me or make me feel bad. And I'm not expecting Jeff or you or anybody else to say, gosh, Ellen doesn't like that, so if you got to back Ellen and don't vote for that. No, you've got to look at the merits of it and vote appropriately.
Is we both have different standards on ethics and honesty. If mine are higher than yours, then so be it. That's the way it is. If you're offended by that, that's your problem, not mine.
Jim, with all due respect, your ethics and your honesty is not any greater than mine. I can assure you of that.
Okay. I'm sorry you're offended. That's your problem.
Okay, that's fine. I just had to say that. That was all.
Okay.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Moving to the department head reports. Jacob, you had something for us? No? We already heard from the chief, so that's good. Future agenda items and discussion by the village board? Anybody? I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.